one of the big things I think is just a shift that's happened, which is the first generation of media, of digital media over the last 10 or 15 years. The brands that were built were written word, owned and operated website brands. And they were not the future of cable television. They were a bunch of magazines. And that's how we built Thrillist, by the way. And I think what we learned over time is that the way that digital audiences, like anything, they end up aggregating, sort of spending time on a few platforms. There's a huge long tail, but I don't think the answer is people going to a ton of individual websites. People live on Facebook, they live on YouTube, they live on Twitter, they live on Snapchat, they live on Instagram, and what's had to happen is basically much of the industry has had to totally pivot. A bunch of the first generation companies have had to figure out how to be video companies, what that looks like. That's where more and more time is spent. That's what all these platforms have become, is video distribution platforms. So in some way there's like a start over for a lot of the industry.
Do you think there was a bubble or maybe over speculation?
No, I think that a lot of those businesses were being thought of as the future of media, but maybe they should have been thought of as the future of print media, which is a smaller pie.
Fair enough. Okay.
So now now what's happened is there's this next generation of companies being built, and they do have to sort of contend with the fact that they have to share the revenue with these platforms, and the relationships are not they're not even. They're not sort of mutual the way that the way that the cable business was built. I think that's changing quickly, and I do believe that these platforms are understanding the value of premium content and the importance of it and the need for it. And so I really do think things are getting better quickly, even though much of the sort of conversation is still that things are tough in digital.
Okay. Well, let's just, I guess, close out the panel here with Warren. You mentioned advertising. With the rise of the SVOD platforms, which carry no advertising, at least today, that should be a big opportunity, right, for platforms that can aggregate a significant number of eyeballs. What needs to happen here in order for that, again, opportunity to take root?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. So there's more television, more video being watched, right? That includes the SVOD platforms, and so that piece of ad-supported has started to shrink. And at the same time, we've got this sort of, there's been a lot written about online video and all the fraud. So television, over-the-top television has an extraordinary opportunity. Somebody's there, they're watching, they're engaged.
It's brand safe.
It's brand safe. It's great. It's a great point. It's brand safe. You know what you're getting, and you've got a highly engaged viewer about which you have a lot of digital information. Right? It's the same targeting characteristics. And our experience so far has been that marketers are hungry for that. There's a tremendous demand. It's like, I got it. TV, money moving away, what do I do with it? Well, their options haven't been great so far. They are now. They're awesome now. That's really where I'm so encouraged about the potential for growth. That piece of the pie has not grown for television for years, and I think I see growth in the future.
Tom, let me ask you, advertising, are you seeing more traction in things like branded content, monetization from some of the newer emerging digital platforms?
Well, I think the area where we see the most opportunity is, it's leveraging data in a way that really hasn't been done before in regards to television advertising. And so over the last year to 18 months, we've announced a number of partnerships around the ecosystem. For example, the industry consortium called OpenAP. We've also partnered with some of our major distributors, Comcast and Charter and Altice and others, to work more closely on that advertising revenue stream. And how do we go from selling that inventory on our linear channels simply on a kind of demographic basis to a more targeted, instead of just buying, if you wanted men 18 to 34, you might come by Comedy Central. Well, going forward, we want to be able to sell that truck and tender in Cleveland who's watching Broad City on Comedy Central. And that requires partnership, and we've struck a number of partnerships to start to unlock value there, and we see that as a huge opportunity going forward.
Right. Nancy, any last thoughts on the advertising question or anything else going into the new year?
The advertising question, I think, or actually there's a whole bunch of our sales team in here today, but since we've merged with Scripps and come together as a bigger company, there's been a whole sea change of how we're approaching advertising and ad sales, and it's kind of exciting to see where we're going to go this year with all of the opportunities there.
So that's a bigger scale for...
Bigger scale, a bigger audience across the board. I mean, for Discovery overall, now you think about all of our lifestyle channels, which now include HGTV, Food Network, combined with TLC ID. It's just a whole other ability to attract advertisers and give a huge audience to them.
Andre, any final thoughts here on the topics we've been discussing today?
Yes, regarding advertisements, one element needs to be understood is a typical profile of the people using Google or Facebook for advertisements is not exactly the same as a standard advertisement in the TV spectrum.
Right.
And I think there is a real opportunity for operators, for content owners, to really tap in the profile of advertisers that are using today internet. And one of the key elements in these advertisements is much more proximity. Typically, the very large companies like Procter & Gamble, like Nestle, are mostly using TV advertisements. The ones that are using the Google, the Facebook, are much smaller, advertisers that are interested in something that is much more targeted, much more local. And I think that here, with new technologies, there is an opportunity in the television, space to do much better. And here, that should not be considered as defensive, but really offensive. And here, there is a really big potential.
Yeah, to Warren's point. Ben, we'll give you the last word here. Final thoughts.
Let's go hang out in Vegas.
All right, with that, thank you to the panelists for a great discussion. Thank you very much.